Hello, Andrew. Yes, we are. Is it cold? Is it hot here? Do you want to turn this off or any preference?
I think it'll be off, right?
The sun's coming out. You probably...
Yeah, maybe we can turn it off.
Oh, yeah.
No. I'm going to mute you, okay? No hard feelings, please. Yes.
Who's online?
It's the Anila from Nepal, German.
You tell them?
Okay.
Yeah. It's someone to still it. Lam-Rim. Lam-Rim, Titan in Lam-Rim, Pay Mamboyra. Ramamboya Binan, Tachi, Lam-Rim Jimbo. Jiromachi, some Tisha in Matrache.
So first of all, I'd like to say welcome and hello to you all. So today the class that we're going to study is on the Lam-Rim. So generally the Lam-Rim, we say that there are many different types of Lam-Rim. So the specific Lam-Rim that we're going to be studying in this class is the middle length Lam-Rim that was taught by Geshe or Lama Tsongkhapa.
Yeah. Tachidang Ani Pol Lam-Rim say. So Lam-Rim say. Tanya the Mancha Gaelic Choni Bush Pechutam Dra, Lam-Rim said 60. Aina Jabatayo Maritachi, Chuchi Shambatsu in Mamboyon the Yungre.
So in Tibet, usually this term, the Lam-Rim, is usually used by the Gelugpa school. But actually there's not much difference between the teachings that all the other schools also have, which are also can be considered as part of the Lam-Rim family.
Yeah. Ane bena nyingma toina zo kizan la mishe long se to kajuina tapo taji se shwa oduzo taina dizo sama ge tsawa de tanda de chuji lamjun.
So for example, in the Nyingma tradition, we have as the main Lam-Rim, which can be called Lam-Rim, is the words of my perfect teacher, of Patu Rinpoche. And also in the Kagyu, for example, we have the jewel ornament of liberation. And the root of all these teachings come down to one teacher, which is Lama Atisha.
Yeah, Matati and Kantata Lam-Rim se and Bola Yape Tachip Chimu Shush Dreade, so ane Chuchi, Chuchi Pola Pe, Korangitachik, Damat Sama Tsu, ne Sanjik Son de Pe, Jashimushu, you at the Petis, Tabdewogani.
So the main reason for the Lam-Rim teachings to spread so successfully in Tibet is the coming of Joje or Lama Disha. So he came to Tibet and he was able to condense together all the main points of the very vast and very profound teachings of the Buddha into ways of understanding which are more simple to understand, easier to understand.
Yeah, that Dindi Yamba there, and the consent shop, any Pandechiden, Samale, Toba, and it's the Pokin on Sholoka, Dindi Topa Pisha, Topa, and Nashayore, Tinani, Jujilet, and Topachi.
So here I'm going to explain now. Here, you or here in person, you cannot see, but there is a stanza here. That is from a writing, I guess, a text from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which he praises. It's a praise to all the 70 Nalanda masters. And inside this praise, there is a short stanza, which is a praise to Lama Atisha. So this is what I'm going to briefly explain here about this author. Oh, great.
The song did not carry Ane Danadina Yoa Sanja, Ane to some Zabjikasu Malipasi, give us some yellow and Donzetis, Conjung, Ane Tumton, Tinjaji Chuatisha, so on the obsession. That turned out the Ticheti Carson Gorsena, taba sanji chönde de song tsama de ani the counter ani pe song zaba de Geshe was in the shesuj de tsama song tsama mali pa de suduni ta Lam-Rim lingerin balan ze shayore
So here in the stanza of this text, so he says, so all the teachings of the Buddha, all the teachings of the Buddha, which are very vast and very profound, without exception, all these teachings, he was able to condense together into the path of the three capacities or the three types of being. And also, we are very grateful that he was the one that was able to spread and to spread the teachings of the Buddha in Tibet. So for him, we make requests.
Yeah, ta kante karasena sanje song pe jachung shu ta pe mangboy hajing mangboy wa no ta nengang ro tsangma tsudune ta chi nyamling grimba kanri chin che go tu se chi pe tab de wo yunyu ji na tsudune ani song shang ju ji de pe song de pe zawa chi shu yin ba o di dinji song ma chi kar lamsun ro se na da o kanjang ge jong ma zu dang bo ma chi pe shang ge de chuwa de shari se de le ya chi konsan chok ani so sun de aya de shires.
Yes, so Lama Disha was responsible to create this category of the three capacities. And usually we say and we recognize that the teachings of the Buddha, they're incredibly vast. There's a vast amount of things to be studied. And he was able to condense all these topics into something that is easier to understand. And for that reason, His Holiness, he praises Lama Disha.
Yeah. Tadiring also the Lam-Rim de yada chiro boche chi tsonga bog Lam-Rim jingmo de kang le ma ke chiro imba kangshi la di tsawa de ji chusa de Lam-Rim tsama ji chusa de Lam-Rim changchi lam ji ma chu jin ze sha de res ta di ge ne mo le ya tin de Lam-Rim de le che chu kar yo me tin kang le ma.
So the Dharma, the teaching that we're going to study right now is actually a text by Lama Tsongkhapa, so the middle length Lam-Rim. But he says that the root of this text, the fountain, you can say, the source of this text is a lamp for the path of enlightenment of Geshe Lama Disha. So now we're going to explain a bit, we're going to talk a bit about the characteristics of this teaching of Lama Disha. Why, the characteristics.
Ta dindi na ya ta chuji korang ge be ani shong mangbo shik tsam sha ya korang ge song pe mangbo yores tin nang ge ta chi shong tsa che shu chik de changchen Lam-Rim se cha yores.
So also Lama Disha, he also has a vast amount of work. He also has many texts, but we say that the most precious of all these texts is the lamp for the path of enlightenment. Someone is calling. Can you maybe talk to Carlotta? Send her a text.
Yeah, mati chirwa. Ta de ngazo karesena ta de ne de chik Lam-Rim de chuji song de chik tsawa ta yin tang kan ri song de korang pe ne joja ga chani re ani ya chik korang ma thamla ten tong ga chani re mati chik pe shan le chapra ba ba shi yore se ti cha.
So these three categories, these three main characteristics of why this is a root, it's this precious text here. So we can think about the category of topic. So because it has all the main topics, all the topics condensed, it has its characteristics of the topics being complete. Also, the way that he exposed these things is also precious. The way that he was able to explain these topics, and also about you can say the lineage or the systems that he is inside, the systems that he is explaining, they're also very precious.
Yeah, tiong da korang ge joja ane dan de changchi Lam-Rim de song de joja kar se zu kar ping gore kar sung ge yore se on de sanje ge song de le chu de na ane ndo e choda nga ge cho ni che donga niga nenga tsama tsudini ani tale lamdrum na sonshe.
So what is the topic, we can ask, what is the topic of a lamp for the path of enlightenment of Lama Geshe? What is he talking about? So it's a subject very vast, so it's going to be all the points of Sutra and the points of Tantra together, condensed. It's going to be the topics of this text, a lamp for the path of enlightenment.
Mate korangi joja de chi tapa ni joja de ma sombi kable kandishi son yorese rwa kandishi son yorese dire santang de ta chi ane bena sanje son pe jachum shujo ba de su de de tang de kandishi mege korangi ta lomba se gonanda ane ma twin set le ya tamlam kaneli chini to na gaudu kupe ko dewo ane chi nyen dewo teang pe tonda yonjo tonda changjo tinji gan man ku jinji zawti nyamleng grimban na pe tab de won rush tinji gi chani tendang gi chani pe chata ba ba.
So this is the topic. The topic is all the points of Sutra and Tantra. But now talking about the way that he was able to explain all these topics. So he was able to looking at the disciples, looking at the students, what's the way that it's going to be easiest for them to understand? What's the way that's going to be easiest for them to listen and understand? So in the stages of the path, so clarifying the stages and making it easy for them to practice, he was able to explain in this way, easy to put into practice.
Penada chingaso pendo shana ta su ko de ora peno lobsen to jina ansi da way na de na tsir karina lobsen chikpa ina ya gegen manja ba lobsen ching de she jap ta na gegen ane gegen di tonda de sama hakwa de na me ke lobtul mara ti kable ya en chik kashi ane te ko ma de ru chi so de kan shi la chi ngon tin do ya kashi pe Kurumbayina ta lamsa nye dewa tonda lamsa kondwe tindi chita tindi chechu yori sugu yori sitanandile
so for example we can think of maybe when we were in school, so it can be maybe a science class or a mathematics class, so we can have the same topic being explained, but according to the different teachers. So for example, one teacher, he can be very knowledgeable about what he's talking about, but his way of explaining is not so easy to follow. You cannot quite understand after the class is over, you don't quite understand. But there are some teachers that they can be very clear. The stage is guiding you how to understand the topic. They know the same amount maybe about the topic, but about the way they explain and they show the teachings, there is a difference.
Suwo de korangi rantub ksewana kachi kong rishi, kong kuala tigayore korangi. Ya kong tigsa de suwo tanda shinta chingwa nyi sayada. Gombo latada papa tomewa. O konyi ge song de shishache. Di song shishache ya kanshi la, di nyi ge song ge kangle, kiba shamba jar, kiba song ya nimbe jab. Tindi chin ma tablam ta ma. Ani sanje ge song de ma, ani
And also in the third aspect, so it's a bit in what shoulders a Geshe is standing on to explain all these things. So of course it starts with the Buddha, and also there's the systems of sometimes in Buddhism they're called the two trailblazers, which are going to be Nagarjuna and Asanga. And also with these two systems, very precious systems, also there are many different scholars that wrote commentaries on this. And with these systems, with this background, this background is also contained in whatever Geshe is explaining. So it's also precious because of all of this background that's helping him.
Yeah. So
now explaining a little bit about these two trailblazers, Asanga and Nagarjuna.
Yeah. Te kanechini chungles ya tere tanda ane penas tomba sanje koran shirish koran shiri kap shiri kap le ya pe ane chumambo shu sanja pe ka pe tene ane karsa ta koran loma zena da pe kepa ta chumba pe mambo shu shiri kap le ane pe karsa ta sanje sun karina pe sibo si jamrosh kap titi ni chade ores pe.
So for example, at the time of the Buddha was explaining the Dharma to many people. And these people, they're said to be arahats or scholars, people with a very developed, very strong mind. So whatever the Buddha said, whatever the Buddha was explaining, for them, it was extremely clear. It was very easy to understand for their minds, very easy to keep to.
Right. Ane ta tomba ni majibi kapsinanda tomba ta chik ane nyangalim dini ta lo mambo uchi ta lo rimbi jata mambo tendo jile ya ta karichungore se tirta tiwaligro ta ti jile karichungore.
And then the question can arise, so okay, so the Buddha, he taught this and then he passed away, he went into parinirvana. And then many centuries passed after this. And then you can ask, what happened after so many centuries?
Tati kableya penani tomba ane nyangalim dini lo jijagin samlaya lo jijaga yema tawalaya ta chik nambi senanda sanje sonje chute netang kandi jore sionde ti kableya ta chik ti chemba nangya wamabe ane ngoleya sanje ma sonsha yaram batso ta tele chonchang to tele chonchun chenge mambole wama rangi tawan zingit pe karzu yongzhang zhawo chama tuwe mi kashi yu na koko sisi zhawa dede na mato yongzhang kami nyamli chiya tabe tinti yu liksa tabe nyamcha shiwa zhawa karzu na tachi shamba ta tene jojo chenke ta tinti yu wangka kama ten.
So about almost 4 centuries after the Buddha went into parinirvana, after the Buddha passed away, specifically the teachings of the Mahayana and also the teachings of the Madhyamika, because of it was facing many bad conditions. There were many people that were harming the teachings, and so the situation of the teachings was not ideal, was not very healthy. About after 400 years after the Buddha passed away, these teachings were in danger.
Yeah, and tomba koran shashigi kable karason yerzen do mambo nangler do lengar shapa tiso nangler kare yerzena nganyangan dibe wale lo jijagan samle ani tindish kepashi chungures mani nyangan di wote lo ni jijalo balas ta gelon ani parde chutaba time leshimbo korangi lo jijagan samle ani gelon shi pegre korangi ming de res ani ko pe show ta sanje tembale pe pento chungureze sanje ta koran cheji kam non tenjo.
So there's something that is written not just in one sutra. Sutra are the teachings of the Buddha, condensed, the texts. So not just in one sutra, actually in many sutras, you can find that the Buddha has said 400 years after I go into parinirvana, after I pass away, the teachings are going to face some danger. And there's going to be one gelong, one fully ordained monk who is going to be born in the land. And he actually, in the sutra, is written the name of the monk and saying that he was going to benefit a lot the teachings of the Buddha in this time, 400 years after his passing away.
Yeah, anti kableya ta ane gelong di minglian sinliya ta ane ta lutub zesh ndi yawa tsama sabo sonsha ta kanda karresyon de sanje ne gomba zoni lo jijagan samle gomba lutub ne penjo resta.
And it was written there in the sutra the name Nagarjuna of the person who was going to come. And exactly after 400 years, there was a scholar named Nagarjuna.
Ane tati kableya ane gomba lutub pene ta chik ngoliya ane omi tawa ta omi songku korleya nyamcha senanda ti nyamle chengere karina ti nyamchan tuwe ti ya nyamso chiyandu ti ni chonyeres.
And this is what Nagarjuna did in his time. So before Nagarjuna came, these teachings of the Mahayana, specifically of the Madhyamika, which is the last of the philosophical schools, of the 4 philosophical schools, it was decreasing, it was diminishing in India, and he was responsible to renovate, to resuscitate it in a way.
Now, take am la korangi sonde na tanda omar so tukse ta pekera chimushu omi college ani mandawa tuk tambanze shayr.
And he
So
has,
shirabla sopa.
and he has 6 they're considered his 6 main works, which are all about this topic of the Prasangika Mahayana, this view of the Mahayana, the Madhyamika.
Yeah, what tinto ta tenashing ta chicken only Papa Tomere. Papa Tomena, Papa Tomela Tara long te chipachayore. In a lotse the carry on isn't it? Sanjay and young Alendini Loguja. Loguja Chile, Papa Tome per. Papa Tomelea, Tandan Doganon, long te Tara chipachayore. Then in the pay set. The Papa Tometi so Caracolia and the Yamso, Senator Yam. Nyamchang Drian and Zun Yamson of Check, so cultures, sends them with our Timtajing and sends them a quarter, Gomolodo or Mabi.
And also exactly in the same way, also in many sutras written also with his name, there is the Asanga. There is also a prophecy for the coming of Asanga. Just the times are different. Asanga, it was written that he was going to come 9 centuries after he passes away. That's the time that he actually came. And Asanga, a difference also is Asanga. So we said that Nagarjuna, he was responsible for the Madhyamika teachings, this philosophical system. Asanga was about the Chittamatras, or you can say the mind-only school. So the third, from the 4, the third, this one. Madhyamika is this one. Chittamatra, mind-only is this one.
Yeah, on the only that counter caresinas. Sanjay son Sama Tsudi on the Namji in a touch. Dutch Lobsintos in the young Zindarichikani, Gosha Jamna, Zindarichikon Disenchena, Pena Ane Zindandu, Disenchina. Then was the Tim Talegre, Takonten Zindando, Zindando, Shigno, and Lobtando was in another content, finish Shignoma. They got us in the Chetama to Diba since Mobas.
And a way also to understand these 4 schools, these 4 philosophical tenets, is in the way of classes, like in a school. So you have the first class, you have the second class, third class, fourth class. So the first class in this case is Vaibhashika. The second class is Sautrantika. The third class is Chittamatra. And the fourth class is Madhyamika.
Yeah. Tainayan Tanda Ani Tumta Womani and Namjak Sondang de Ani Tindi Yamsu Chi Goya, Tindi and the Tanda Chonyo Maris. Tumta Woma about the sins and be teaching Tumtaga. Telian, that Junjunto, the Karina, Tindine Tamabuchone, the Tomba Jerji Gilliam Chashundrea. In a sense, Chetama and Dodi Vitawas in the Tindi Kolea, and Tindi Shintas and Jezia, Tindi Chongo Chonyo Maris, Mixia, Yamchashundo Maris. Yamcha, Jondo, Tindi.
So the second ones, they're not related to the Mahayana. And they didn't suffer this decrease, this diminishing in this time. So the one that suffered more of this was the mind only, the Mahayana tenets.
Yeah, that Delia Shinta Sanjay, Kunin and main country story said, the pain gone metan, Shinta said that Captiti, Jalomba, Shinta said, Akura, Shinta Pepe Chombo Shutanga. That is only the modern of Tangora.
Yeah.
Penachik that Tesang Pejana to watch in Motor Langa Shipazosana, Mamoto Langaya was shush, Doton Samaya was so. Tipari Lomabu Chili, that she on Chore Karina Tindu. I'm got some Amatol on top. She's a Jito Yang Jer, the Lamgat Yasuchin Kichuna. In Shinta Solinjez on the Namaga and Shinta Rosalangado. Shinta the peg on the metanjure. Money Chenaka Tomba Jerji Kalatomba Korangi, and it's teaching me Namshat. Teaching Greta or Mabi Namja, Sinzambi, Namja, Pe Sibo Sonja, she's my Junchandro, the Jet Yamsodochi. You're gonna meet on your bacon.
Yeah, so explaining just a little bit why they're called trailblazers too. So trailblazers in Tibetan, I believe they use the term Shinta, which literally means the horse of wood, the wooden horse, which is a term they use for chariots, right? Or carriage, I guess. Nowadays, this was the example back then. Nowadays, you can think of cars and etc. and bikes, etc. And so for these chariots to be able to move in a city, in a village, they needed to have a very much broader, much wider road than if you're just someone walking by. So they're called the trailblazers because this road, for example, in this example, this road you can understand as the presentation that the Buddha had given before of the Madhyamika and the Sentampa and the Chittamatras, the mind-only school. And these roads with the time, just like if we nowadays, if you forget about a road, so grass is going to grow, the trees are going to start to come on it. So again, you need to make this road very clear, very, very clean, so that again, the chariots, the carriages, or the cars, they can go in this road. So this was their function, to clean this road again.
Yeah, ne baba tome de be kitchen bu shush sigwe shinda chimo sevet kunila musive den jong do te gwe de ninga tin shires kunyi be ti gang le ya karsurta chale jima son de be jachim shush na shires.
So for this reason, because their work was so vast, and for this reason we consider them to be very important in Buddhist history. For this, that's why they're called trailblazers.
Yeah, tangachu samlochi kartango dusinra tangarangi samsel majo tanda lo gyongchi de karal lo gyongchi yorese de tiwachi karal lo gyongchi yore kandezi chi yore.
Yes. So in my opinion, there are two things that we have to think. First of all, about study. What are we going to study, and how are we going to study?
Yeah. Ode gableya lo gyongchi sate tanda majo de manjom ke tsamba to nang che sate kha to no cho tabe ane sanje zia ke ra chum si chum korang ge song sha ya te pe sa chum bu shin ba tsama muir ti ga ya so so ta chi ni ma re re chue to le na te so so ti ga ya te so to na pen tong to se lo gyongchi sate ti da.
So the thing that we all gathered here because we have a common interest, and the place that is the place of our attention here to study, it's going to be the teachings of the Buddha. That's what we usually consider to be precious and important. So that's the thing to study.
Yeah. Taina tomba songsha te peke tunsha ye langa de lo gyongchi ale ya tanga sa khandi che gre se tele chedang de tomba jerji bi kable chetang gramba chik tene ma ne tang gombo rutub da khuso jerji bi kable han ten lo gyongchi tang gramba chik do ta tesan maso tanda tang gombo rutub su gomba zoni pel no ma bu shu chil tanda ne babla maso khandi che lo gyongchi se.
So there is but then when we're thinking about how to go with this study, how do we study this? So there is a way of understanding this in the time of the Buddha, and also with Nagarjuna, using the explanations of Nagarjuna. But nowadays, how are we supposed to study this? Because also nowadays, since the passing away of Nagarjuna and Asanga, also many years have gone by, many centuries have gone by.
Yeah, that tomba jerji we come to ena jinga sundi no jinga depka gana jaya do da tini kai kachamido koran kapti tomba ma son kapti ni tadi koran ga yadircha sinanda kort se be baya oda kargani na kapti tini do chimado ma son jinga tani mari presidenti jamgoya da te pai kapti no le kwa do kamido.
So for example, in the time of the Buddha, his students, they were not with, for example, with the notebook and with the pen and writing notes. They were not using slides. They were not studying this way, using even written things. So the students in the time of the Buddha, they had a very clear mind. They were able to listen and memorize instantaneously. They were able to remember everything that the Buddha was saying.
Yeah, tomba karasong sha de kapti kati so so nyamle le jar korang ge ni mare re nyamle rang le jam ni ro sha ma to ta chi tombo lob jong si che te shin ni nyamle che zen ro mai ba korang lob jong de nyamle nyam de.
They were able to for example, as soon as they heard the teaching of the Buddha, they knew exactly how to apply this into practice, how to apply this in their lives, and in the same day they were able to practice whatever he said. It's not like nowadays, maybe we have first to study, understand what's being said, and then we can maybe try to put into practice.
ko tamba jig mara ko semle yani the koronte ya change te wata gumse na te onde ta tele to jab go ya ro da din ti ne tan kan mi do.
Yeah, so because they had this ability of keeping in mind and not forgetting whatever they heard and how to practice and the stages of the practice, everything, they had no reason to write anything or to write any text, anything.
Ta teni tomba ne gon ta nyangan din lo mo bo ji le ya ta tercha mo bo ji an zom te shini sanje song so ta il tong ro ma pam den dik sa ma re se. Ani ta chi pa la ndo ya ro. Ko so ta timba na yun je sama ik to ma pap shan chu shi. Ta te sang so kan yir se ji te ya de ta ti tin di chong shan chu shi ro.
이러가 쓰시다.
Ta te lo ta ta shi nga ko so. Lo chi ka de ti ma sum se ore. Ta jum ba so ti ma sum. Ani te san sum ti ma sum zom ne ti mi chi.
So after the passing of the Buddha, there were 3 occasions, 3 meetings of the arahats, of his disciples, where they decided that for the future of the teachings, it was better to have everything written. And because they had this incredible mind that were able to remember everything, they got together and they were reciting and writing everything that the Buddha has said.
Ta ina ta chi chi le na lo jong chi kab le ya ta. Tomba sung pet ya che ta ne. Ta de chang me mi che ge ta nga zong ro mi se chi ge na te chang ma lo go na ya. Ale lo jong che ba sha ko ma che chi lo go na ya de lo shi re ma do. Pe ma ta. Ta di ji le ya gar ke pa ma bo. Ta ne ga chang ma che dom ni. Ta ne ten ju se ta gong bo lo de la so pe ne ma za shi se ro wo de chi ta. Ti chi se ta ta. Then da ta ba ku se wo man ji pa se so chang ma ne ga sang su de jo. Ta din de ge ya ten ju. Din de chi chung ge chung.
But nowadays, for us to go straight to this text that we're reading, straight to understand and study this text, it can be very hard. It's not so easy. It's a lot of text. So also these Indian masters, they were responsible of gathering, of understanding the meaning of these words and saying in ways that are a little bit more brief, a little bit less words, easier to understand. And also after the first Indian masters, after a few centuries also, for example, with Chandrakirti, again, you have more explanations to be easier for the contemporaneous people of the time, to also be able to understand.
Taina tanda gombo ludu korong sang tanda jar keba nalen tang keba korong sang song jaya de korong sang share shi be kabla korong sang be kabla ko dewo de gong song sha chawor chago yore korong sang de cha so kapti te ko to yore den de sha ko mar taina yang ti serem be do te te kabla ta ma so de shi kapti ko so song lo da to gre bo ina jur sha yora ina mambo shi. But
also in the same way of the Buddha, at the time of Nagarjuna, when he was in a Nalanda monastery before in India, and he was explaining these things, explaining the teachings of the Buddha, it was very easy to understand for his students, very easy. But nowadays we have the teachings of Nagarjuna. We have it written. There is translated both to Tibetan and some of them to English too. We can read this text. But nowadays, it's not easy to understand anymore. It's not easy.
Yeah. Ti ginseng ta ti chi siang bogun keba so kuzo yang ten dishi tsam yor dishi tsam koran reba tsam ta danda ti tandi nekal ma so kar lo byong chi gore ma chi shi ta ngole jar keba so kapti kuzo song ja de lo byong chi tongge yor te pe gore ti mena yang kuzo gen reba la ta reba da di ninga ta tinri chini lo byong chi tong ba tanda ta tsu tsama lo byong chi de sangje song de lo byong chi Taulan karpe jo tanga re, jaan ki pe song. Te jaan ki pe song le kaptik pagi sanji song tata kugume na, te gangle pogun ki bazu samsha driba, te ta, driba tan.
And because of this reason, the same reason, nowadays and a few centuries ago, there are also Tibetan masters that were also responsible of composing commentaries, of composing texts that facilitated the understanding for the people of the time. So the thing that we are studying, the thing to be given attention to understand is the same thing. It's also the teachings of the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni. But the way, the method that we understand these teachings, is through the workings of also these Indian masters. If one is able to understand directly and there are people like this, if they are able to understand directly the Indian masters, okay. But to clarify, to become easier for the people of this time, we also use the method of studying the later commentaries in India and also the commentaries in Tibet and everything that was composed to facilitate the understanding of the teachings of Shakyamuni.
Tayina ta tiwa karli gre sanje sharji bi kablaya sanje sona kapti ko dewo ko tuya chik yo che tichi se jan ke ba so son kablaya ko so son pe kapti ko te ta tande ti kap ke mi ta chinga so mi chongram do kshena na so ta yaren do yore digrin do yer karchin ko tu yo maris tiwa ta.
And one question can arise, because if it's said that at the time of the Buddha, it was easy to understand for his disciples, and at the time of Nagarjuna and Azang, it was also easy to understand, then we can have the question, are we getting better, or are we getting worse as human beings?
Yeah, thanks namgi the Tsering condition do jamna.
If you explain a bit in the scientific perspective.
Kuzo nga so ta Tsering rang gang de sha jamna nga so mi leba penjur chongrab ade na jing ge chi mi chongrab ta na yare do ya ka chi simba ko leba ine chere.
So in the understanding of science, we talk about the theory of evolution, right, of Darwin. So we're getting better. Our brains are getting better. So we go from being animals that cannot think so well to the state that we are right now, and we keep improving on top of this.
Ta kasi mi chongrab ta hara imba cha sha ro Tsering sheba na chongrab ta nga so leba de penjun do ya yare do yo ba de we ni tsaim ba cha ro ta ngwe na te laba cherin do atsam se ge yang nga so rigba de yare do yo mari ya mi samlo tang de yare do mari.
So yeah, if you understand the science explains, okay, that's we can accept it. That's a real situation, that the brain is evolving, the brain is getting better, performing the function of the brain. But then we can also ask if our thinking, our capacity of understanding, or the capacity of us to use the way that we think, if this also follows the capacity of the brain, or if this also improves in the same way.
Taina Tsering di chongrab chik evolution penjur ba gang sha da lo bambo show lo saya ke chini ke shigdo te mena yang ta chik ti so tuntu ji na yimbe ko cha cha na yang ta lo ja cha tong ta ke shi me ona ta chik chena ngo so mi jiung ge mi se bo chu dang chen ya ren do yong ta na yang jin xian ba wang ge ma so le jun chen ge de ma ren do ya ti chen ni chik chena chi jin ma ta chi jin ben da chik tin de wang ge nga so ge ta chik sam lo de ya jin do ma to ya le ba ya jin do ya na yang chik tin de yong se ba chi jin ga.
Yeah, and also this explanation of the evolution theory of Darwin, he's talking about a vast amount of time, a lot of time. So it's not talking about just a few centuries, and also because of external conditions.
Yeah, chikchena tatizo tundu shikna pena tomba sheshi kap. Tanda ti chis tangombo la do so tanda parile haching do show tare buta marwa. Mare de kap didi mi samla tang de so da tanda nga so mi samla zibo tu che gani mi di yare leba su yare do yon tang ya. Chikchena samlo tang ya ji do ma ta karchiri. Samlo tang de digrin do ya karchiri. Digrin do yare yo mar so do yo na.
So since the passing away of Nagarjuna, we had a few centuries already, but in a biological sense, we cannot consider this to be a very long time. But even if the brain has improves in this time, now we can ask why, or if it's possible that our way of thinking, our critical thinking, can improve or can actually diminish. And if we see that maybe it's getting worse, then we can think of what are the reasons for this, where the conditions, maybe there are external conditions that we can see of why this might be happening.
야 다다 당기니 마시야 되 가르잖아. 다 단다 가서 들이 단다 가서 롭경 치야 되 가르잖아. 아니 단다디 남던데 보그 가르스. 야 나오는 템보데 보그 개바 단지 정화 막 소식래. 디 가르는 데바 저거요래 남던 전체 남던도 야 개바 데 주지 소사 딘디시죠. 디 이제는 가서 가르를 롭경 치야 상제 송고 쓰듯이 샤안조데 다 냠랭 그럼발라 쳤던 그럼바 간디요레세 당서 팅인 드시 뭐지 잡고야 돼 단든 디아로 어디니 막까지.
So coming back to what are we studying? So yeah, we are studying the Lam-Rim, the stages of the path, the middle length Lam-Rim of Tsongkhapa, and this is coming from the length for the path of enlightenment of Atisha, and the explanations of Atisha are coming from this whole lineage of Sangha Nagarjuna, and etc.
Yeah, 다 대체운데 다 텐데리 아니 로종체 당의 가르 간데지 정기요레세 숑데 대치기로 다 텐데리 아니 숑들이 제주 가르투세요. 제주 코로나야. 치완도 아니 지지 강이 맞으시죠.
So yeah, so this is the method that we were using to understand the teachings of the Buddha, and what are the we talk about greatnesses. What are the characteristics of this method that we're using, these instructions that we are using? What's so great about them?
다 간데용 거래서 온디로와 간데용 거래서 온데 아니 드소티데 담가세 담가세가 가래서 온데 이숑 짜침부 상마 로병 세나다 디강의 냠뇨다 고도 연계 속에 가르치르세 주드니 다 닌동도 돈다 주드니 답대오 간이 마시야 딘디신 거래 디 담가세 거래 다 담가 딘디 제과 가르치르세 온데 델리아 제추 문다와스 지도시 내가 문도 시간이 막 담가 델리아 제과야 돼 간데레zon이 상지 송 망보시오리 데 상마데 다 게시기 세나니 칙텔이 양가와 망보시 통 쩐네 딘딘가 망보시 통에 뜻을 된가와 메와 딘디를 용치 터나 상마 내지를 바베 딘디 제추식 두세야 지그래 세부자서
So these instructions that we have here, we have a class of teachings that in Tibetan they say Damgak, which you can think of, for example, one master, he has undergone a vast training, a vast understanding of all these extensive teachings, and he's able to condense them into points that are easier to understand. So one of the powers of these instructions that we're going to study, one of the greatnesses, is that we can see that all this vast amount of teachings, they actually are not contradictory. Nothing that was said here are contradictory. They are all harmonious.
Yeah. Onde 다치 돈도 주드나 상제 손데 아니 손등이 전에 빼르문라 마무시 somsai. 즉 참선은 손코론 따잖아요. 간이나서 섬대지 송에다 샴바지 송에니까 돼. 즉 가와도 통돼. 돈도 직심바. 다이는 잠중고 고알린 거야. 마무시. 디 고아 정말 잠중 정말로 병치마도나. 단 가와는 통. 대운데 가완도 의성데 와다 딘디요 말스 템바 텐징 가미도 톱. 가와메 바토아게 딘디 체치요레 존딘디로 병치타나시.
So one danger that's very easy to come when you study the teachings of the Buddha, because the Buddha in his time, he had enormous skill to explain things in different ways. So for one disciple, he would say something. For another disciple, he would say something that if you don't understand the context, you've never learned about the background of the context of everything that he's teaching, you look at them at first sight in a superficial way, and they seem to be extremely different things. They seem to be contradictory. So that's the point. One of the goals of this teaching is for you to actually understand the background, the context of this, so they don't seem as contradictory to you.
Yeah, penane ta timtashi kon timtashi roina timtashi ni ani soso ani timtashi soso ta she tangshi ngundo shana kapitana bedka ni karsar to chod hoshite 저 주는 민족
Mm.
다이나 초 샴바지니 다나 마서지 벤도 위잖아 다지 초 망바 베나 잘라를 신용도가나 잘라 신용도는 아주 성공 신도가나 성공 신용도 가서 배치 남거든요 차샤 한국 진영에 가려야 초 망보지니 따가요 아서 그런 게 다지 서다지 녹까지 다 지자카리스 권세카리스 가시 락발 쓸리니 고 지세 서자 주고 가는데 근데 때 가진다고 그랬어요. 때 참아도 돈도 버기 아니 쇼 칼라부터 그 버기 소소 강연도 버 잘라도 야보시라에 쳇. 다 초직이 있다니. 초직이 있다니 야본도 초직이 있다니 지금은 라츠마이 버초 망보시 있다고 해야 돼. 베기 지무차기도 앞에나 잘라지냐나. 어떤도 오래서 선지 단데 좀 더 지송해야 돼요. 좀 더 레레 아니 시츠데 하고서나 야 샴바가 시탄데다 군이들 tindi rimbachi tini koya rimbachi loya wanshi
Det var inget dissa kommer som det där kokiran kishu samala.
tambojer petishata pena kichu samala tatana jaran tamale chala hamgor jinyana pe te pita ko jinyara gido asi ate kharchene chomambo jini tachi chego do asi tendo go shiresi chumda rire shetan de hago sona joja chigba inne shetan da ko koalen tam mandra idea mandra chak
So for example, talking about the philosophical systems, these 4 philosophical systems that we talk about, if we see the way that they talk about things, the way that the presentations go, it seems to be extremely different. So it seems to be opposite. But we can understand them in a way of stages to generate one understanding. And to set one example, let's say, for example, you're going to buy something. So you go to a shop and you're going to buy a shoe. So before buying the shoe, to make sure that you're going to buy something of good quality, so you're going to see all the characteristics of the shoe. You're going to see what materials it's made of, and you're going to see the weight of the shoe and the design of the shoe. And in this way, you can assure that you can understand the shoe. And I guess in the same way, I didn't quite understand the relationship with the tenets, the philosophical schools. But in the same way, I guess you have to understand first everything that all the philosophical systems are saying, so you can understand the product as a whole.
I think so. So lo jang rimbando pena tachi tandati ane inda usalo dana pena chi tachi tsama manche jang yare dembani sesh tachi tsama koy jirsa dembani dembani se ti deshi pena maso chi chala do de chi kang ya tatang kang ya tatang korangi chi decha do de khare imbe tatang kang ya chimta su be sama tanda re yor Ti savla tang ta re susu lo le ya pendo shu do dana nga so chala ngoni ra go ya chala de kar re na susu be an samlo ya ji ta susu be sim kam le ya pendo do ane non ke de kar re sha pendo ke kar re sha ta de pen tong ke ti dubya le ya ane tumta susu she tang re on de chene pendo pare da shambadi dindi mare pavsho cho shambadi ni ta go re das dindi cho shambadi ta go ti garpen tore tama le soso we samu to soso we semgam ya ji ta ege hamgo pejate dindi lo jinde kashi se bor ko
For example, did you play this recording or no? So it's not recording. It's okay. So, for example, each philosophical system, if we talk about the 2 truths, I think everyone here maybe is familiar with conventional truth and ultimate truth. So it's all about the way that you look at an object. How do you perceive an object? And each of the philosophical systems are going to have one way of perceiving this object and of understanding and explaining how to look at this object. So it's going to be one tenet's going to be looking at this characteristic and it's going to say, oh, if you look at this, it's going to benefit your mind. So because the whole point here is to develop your mind, for you to develop your way of looking at things, develop your psyche. So, and then another philosophical system is going to come and say, no, it's actually this thing you have to look, and it's going to benefit your mind, and this. So at the end, what you're doing is, just like with the shoe, you're looking at many different characteristics, you're looking for many different perspectives, and if you get used to look at many different perspectives into the object, that is going to make your mind evolve. That's going to make your mind develop, and you to get closer to what the object actually is, to the truth.
Yeah. The ginseng tachik dodana sanje song mandra mabush song ningang stier. So ani magi tanke zongana nyamle chenge ole jinjik telia so samlon ramandra yor. Samlon ramandra la pape ya kurang samlo ya kar sitang ramba. Samlo tancho ramba la pape mandra wa song goyate. The Tsaman Tatina Karachi zonde so with Tachik Lo Joyramba.
Yes, sir. So that's talk in a brief way. That's the reason for the teachings of the Buddha. They are the reasons, all these different thoughts, these different perspectives that are being proposed, these different teachings are to develop the mind of the disciple, to get somewhere.
Yeah. What
question can come from this?
Okay,
so he said a lot of things, yeah.
Ane tele chikpe pento shashi nyunyuch songna. Koya depo. So ane pena danda chanta dedo ina chanchel lamdun regina. Te mato goya medusita. Ani shamba jongja chungu to songde so nyamle shana kan ping mares.
So one thing that it's common to arrive is to, okay, so why there is such so many teachings, why it's so vast, so many texts, so many things written, and we have here text, for example, we were saying here that this text, it condenses all the topics of the Buddha's teachings. So it can come the thought, okay, so maybe I just need this. And why do we have all these other texts? I mean, you can just condense everything into 3 pages.
Yeah, the Javatilata, Lenjamge Kashi Karla Anta de Chick Show Kalorta Chick Ane Chick Ko Milipa Chick shared what in Delia Pejachu show you the grace. No, so Yamle Pingamares, Yamle Chelia. Share the down and the deposit, shape at the Dubani, the local, Kunya Dragon Yomaris, shape Rambala Pejachum, that's also Kinyam Doya, so Kipa Imba, Teado, Tindiche tomato, Pendo Yomaris in it, indeed, that Jomosis.
So there are also some people that they're going to say, yeah, all these vast teachings, all these texts and etc., this philosophy, there are things to be said, there are things to explain, and there are things for scholars, and scholars are going to explain, and they're going to make a name for themselves. But actually, this is not so beneficial for the mind. Beneficial for the mind are specific, instructions, personal instructions that are easy to practice. This is beneficial. All the scriptures, they're not beneficial to the mind. So some people are going to see these things as being separate. What is to be practiced and what is to be studied and explained, and what is classroom setting, not to be practiced. So this distinction can appear as separate things to your mind.
Yeah. Tangindi, this she where the Karesina. Tana test Nasu Tesang Lobjong Chia Mamboshite. Touch Gomba Kali, Chinyag did ingeta, the Lord Lomasecor Lobjonchi de Gina, this Lohare, Kuzo Jean Jachubusu Tatuir. And Gomba, Te Maingeta, there's some chick. Tisopichania, Tila Saporo.
Yeah.
Meonde, Tangazo, Jean Chinchu Tower, Jean Chinchu Bay, Tanda Lam-Rim, Tanda Lamdundro, the Tenajing, Lojongpe, Lojongpemo, Lojonsi German, Lojonsi, Pair Momba. Tisota Diana Paritoa. Tig Yanchi Simnon, Tisolam, Tanda Karsota Mata Rantandro, Chagichi, Tata Kabli, Tiso the Kani Chong in Bati. Parilin developed Hamagona. yang shong chimbu so da ta chi shu ta ma ta yo ma zo nyam le chi ni chi ma to go ma
No, listen, do I?
ko je min do shi ton ni so ti de zo ke ba nyam le shu ko zo lo yong sang ma che sang ge zo tu ni su du ni ning gang do shi ti sha in par en je de wo tin ding ma su ha ko go ya no.
So, of course, nowadays, especially nowadays, you're talking about the vast amount of teachings. Of course, the scriptures are very hard to if you go to a monastery or if you go to a nunnery, and if you really have time to study this text, then you study this text. But nowadays, most of us, we are very busy. We lead a busy life. We have to work, etc. So it's very useful. It's very important for us to keep and study these texts that condense the teachings. For example, the Lam-Rim, what we're going to study in this class, and also the 8 verses on mind training, the 3 principal aspects of the path. All of these, they're very useful for the people who don't have the opportunity to look into this big text. But one thing that you have to keep in mind while studying this text, you cannot think, okay, so this text, they have everything, so the scriptures, they're not important, or the scriptures, you have to recognize where these instructions, where did these brief instructions, they come from. So they have a source. The source are the scriptures. So they have actually a very strong connection, what is to be practiced, and these scriptures, they have actually a very strong connection. So, but some people, they might fall into the danger of not seeing this connection to the scriptures, to this philosophy, and these very practical instructions that we have also in Buddhism.
다소 소게다지 강토도 그냥내 지에 그런바 나래야 shongchimo tsama nima re tasen ta kono toye kono yongba ta chik tonda peki logna kogore de na ta te ma chachi logo ya kono miksi ta kare yore se na miksi chuzo pa chikchen tono chong yore ane miksi ta chik chawa ta gishi tso ne kandun yi kesi yashi nima re kono ngi chuk donde yashi towa te kare re se hondi tsama tsudu janju jangyang re ta te kare che na nga tsu tenso wichet ko te tsikre re nyingi mato yo ma re 되게 다 데레레 만들었는데 소소 싸우러 당해 갔던 거. 다디 잡정 붙잖아 싸우러 당했던 게. 전속이 제들.
전속이 리마인드.
이민도 것이 단제와데 디 잡는 데데 숑르레 마 수수 말로인데 이 갑자기 싸우러 당당데 데 선선. 인디징이 바로
So, for example, to say one example of how this is traditionally used, many of these texts that condense the points. So, for example, the monks, they're going to stay usually for 30 years studying deeply these scriptures, the 5 main texts of the corpus of the teachings of the scriptures. And after this, after they leave the monastery or they finish their studies, then they're going to use either as the daily recitation or something that they're going to look at daily, these instructions, these personal instructions, which are very condensed. And when they look into this, then because they have the background of the knowledge of the scriptures, then actually there's a very strong relationship between them, because we are going to recite this, and at the same time, it's a reminder for us of a lot of things. So each verse is going to remind you of many things that you can meditate, that you can keep fresh in your mind. So through using this short text, they are able to keep in mind all these teachings that they have studied.
Yeah, that one the cousin Sanjay is it and I think the Javan kepa book kepa bush songs. The sama donda de so touch similar nyamling. Tatina teach it to some mangayo marisi and then dinolia that indici to yours did you come into
So the second, now we're talking about the second function, you can say, or greatness of this teaching that we're going to study, which helps you to see that actually all the sayings of the Buddha, which are very vast, all the commentaries by the Indian masters, all the commentaries of the Tibetan masters, everything of this, all the philosophy, everything, actually these are points to practice. All of these are practical points that you can put into practice. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's somebody. 다 가르치는 것으로 단다들이 강의 주시다 주자이. 다 선바대 가르치나 아니 당은 저거니 자기 강의션 뭐시래 선지다 들리가 송래야 농정치 겁래야 다 정치모 농정치 국가의 가보리 뒤서야라고 말해 다 강다 이나에 가서들 농정치 국을 강의 뒤 그게 돈다도 배 기초보 배자 친구들이 가서들 농정치로 다 제단 가르치는데 단단히 춘추식 가서 안내 참마 창조 된데 위종 춘춘식 나타니 뒤진이 밖에 로병치 지우로 단단히 안에 송라 즉 위종 첨부 돈다 참마 학과에 제대 단단히도 단단 정신은 런도 된디식 제니 따고야 다 냉가식 차대어레스 돈다는 식고서
Listen. Yeah, so going to the third greatness or function of this this teaching is going to be for you to understand easily the meaning of all the teachings. So if you also, for example, if you don't have time, right, to study the big texts, or even if you study and it's also hard to understand sometimes. So but still it's hard to understand, and sometimes we don't have the opportunity to spend years and years studying this text. But if we accept that these teachings, there is something valuable, there is something precious, so we have to understand the meaning of the teachings. It's worth to put some effort to study this. And one way that it's one very precious tool for us to use to be able to get to this meaning and to understand this, it's going to be using these texts. For example, the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, or here the Lam-Rim. Even if you don't have time, right, if you don't have the opportunity to go into the extensive studies, with this text you can understand the meaning of the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah.
tati maso tanda beti tiri maso shediyati zo karare sonde tirta tiri maso tanda tiri maso Lam-Rim korongi shongus mandoyo to tanda doyo mare wani nyamle cheton kandire se de shinile jur ina kandire sonde tambo shondi shon kandire la maso lobjong chiwi yorese tanda tinga tanda beti shediyati tiris.
So now, maybe you have already noticed, now we're not yet going into the Lam-Rim actually so much. Actually, we are going to the Lam-Rim, but not going to the how to practice and to the main topics of the Lam-Rim. Now we're going into how to approach these teachings, how to use these teachings, how to proceed in your studies, how, etc.
Yeah, tanda beti shediyati maso lobjong kandire chiwi yorese tir.
Yeah.
Lobjong kandire chiwi yore. Karala lobjong chiwi yorese ti chikchi. Lobjong chiwi kamla kar pecho tam yore. Kar use chiwi yorese.
So now it's about how to study and what to study. What are we studying and how are we studying it?
Tene di jilma karle udusina lobsin di jima talia. Lobjong chiwi kamla kanong kanishki kukresi. Kanong kar kukresi.
So the next topic that we're going after this, it's going to be knowing how to study this, and how also we're going to generate the motivation, what motivates us to study this, to spend time with this. So in the next classes, we're going to arrive next in the what we call the folds of the pot. Yeah, three folds of the vessel. Yeah, of the vessel, which are basically how to set your mind during the teaching, and also we're going to go into, you can say, ways of seeing, ways of perceiving, perspectives that you can take. They call the 6 recognitions that you can have when listening to teachings. And
어디서 처음에 Lam-Rim 그렇게 무슨 소소 직도 냠내세는 라티름바 정알에 모도도 더 컨디션 베너직 더 컨디션하고 있는 데다 지금 강바지야 조ten치고이나 강바지 조ten치야라 담보 가르코리 가르트득 체코리 사차지나 사차 컨디션 소고리 뭐냐 사차냐 사차이나 바지 집안에서는 사치고 직사 사차진 소고요라 잘하시고라
Yes, so now inside the Lam-Rim, we're going to the introduction. We're starting from the introduction. So for example, if let's say we're going to build a house, so what we're doing right now, we're buying the bricks, we're buying the cement, we're preparing these things, we're thinking how we're going to build the walls and etc.
Yeah, if
you have any questions. Yes.
In which language are the scriptures written? In Sanskrit or?
Originally, the first time. Ni shungshan wanda tu ni gay karire. Most of them are in Sanskrit. Yes.
Yeah, normally Tilia. The Paritoyam Sanskrit in the Mamboji Yamchandro, Polpa Jur, Sanjo the Dedere, Jurmase, Kala Mamboji Yamchandro, Jurmase, Mamboji, Land,
So yeah, so there are many they were first composed in Sanskrit, and then many of them they were translated to Tibetan, and then they were kept. Many of them they were not translated to Tibetan, and they usually some of them they have disappeared or yes.
Yeah, chick Kashi Kandayurine, Polia, Sanskrit in Ayunjot Pale, Leva Kashila, Jurmato. Jurmato, Gilia, Tachi, Namagit, Indi, Gates, some machine, Loza, Tom. Chitava, and then Hakon that didn't know it's our chimbushi about the Hako. A lot to Kari Hamako. Tindi, Yamcha Mambudoya, Tindi, Maboyer.
So I also heard that there were some texts also that they came from India in Sanskrit, and they knew that they were precious teachings, but they couldn't find anyone to translate, or it arrived the text, but they didn't have anyone to translate, and then the great translators that Tibet had, they died, they passed away, and so they didn't know what to do with this book, and so they put in the temple, and okay, I know that this is precious, I cannot understand the meaning of this. There are also some books like this.
Gomba Kashino, let the pets out Chimbushi, but Tadilon Chunji on Kisole. Any Carcer, Peace Chin, Jaya, than that indeed. You get the lot of Marasons, that's all Chimbushi is. That Chunji on Gitele visitor. The Zolia, and Kajile Shole chicks a day, needs a day, the Nichinian.
Needs to tell
Shole chick knee, Shole. Young Samsala Jenny, the Nitin, only a Chulumto. The Nichinian, the chick the deal, then choosing another. Jag keep a son such Mikashita, land and with the choice. Quazo Yapo near the other degree. That's our Chumbushi, Kari Akuma, our Chumbushi Resiat Co. That you're changing donor, you're changing the Gombadin donor, Gombadina dengue the Cholia, Shole chicks Cholomte, Shamba the chicks that the nation taco louder, dear Chonya.
So yeah, so in these monasteries they had or they have these texts, and they know that they're precious, but they cannot read them. So something they did was, for example, visitors were coming, tourists were coming, came to the temple, and they know that this is precious. They know that this is a precious text coming from India, from Indian masters. So they would read one page and they give to the visitor. You take home, and so many of these texts, after some time, we don't have any more these texts neither.
Yeah, the churchini. Depashik Chumuyo. Be could the Chumbu's the only Depashik Chumuyor. That is so kindred, Jelumdo kindred, so the missos and knowledge Ashagre, Pingmarta Shuli Chimatiomer. Langoni the love.
Yeah, so from one perspective, yeah, they have a very strong faith. So they took this page, they took to their house, But then it's just one page, so there's not so much benefit. They would just place in their house, and then after some time, this page also, brought to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what did you
this.
What did you join your rita? Nee, Shabbat,
Any other question?
Yeah, yeah.
你看，这投资的话，你什么东西你就要找个人。
Nice.
那你谈到一个那边送马上去，如果牙个多的多个来多的，这你可以的，就我牙说了多，应该来就多个说了多。
So sorry. So you mentioned before in the teaching that according to the times, our way of thinking is changing as human beings. So is it to the good side or is it to the bad side? That's the question. Maybe something like this.
Yeah, that the Gandhi and Nambi Shunga Shetanta, Sergi Shetani Dragmarisiti Gandhi.
So the Buddhist way of explaining and the science way of explaining, it's going to be a bit opposite in with this question.
Nambi Tatabka Jab Johnson, Tigani Shena, Tamas Ledan Sunam said, and you can yam the drog. Ledan Sunam, yam the drog. Nama, that's Tomba Jaji Cabre, Tadichi Sena, Cableya, Mitsoma Sunam Chimbu, and Elena, let the Castle Zambo Sanke, Tindi Cableya, Mitsoma, the Yard with Theory, Kawayatarsi Cable. Tamonichena, Yadambote.
Yeah, so if we explain in the context of Buddhism, the way that Buddhism explains, they say that karma and merits, they go together. So in the time where, for example, Buddha Shakyamuni was born and people were in his surroundings or these great masters, you had to have very strong accumulation of merit. You have to have very good karma to be born there. And therefore, you were better in a way.
Yeah, and it's Chingni Kaptiti, Mitsina, Tachik. Geshe Karajabja is in a pay me, Tochumo, Supuchumo. Tandaman upon a bit carnage, me to church. That is when sentiment, Akumar contact the song.
And also from one thing that said, I don't know if he said that he doesn't know if it's actual situation or no, but they say that people before they were very strong, very powerful, and nowadays they're getting weaker.
Yeah, me zipo with so that chumbo show tinti tanda derna tini ma ni sonam nyore and chick late the mare sa and me sonam which the music queen chore.
So they say also that the people are very tall and very, very strong, and now because of the bad accumulation of bad karma and also the merits going a little bit down, people are also getting smaller and smaller. Of course, not everyone. But science is going to say that people are actually getting taller nowadays. So
that is one thing about evolution, though. It doesn't just like progressively get better without a pressure. Evolution, right? You actually have to have a selection for something, right? It doesn't just generally get smarter. There has to be a reason why dumb people are dying, smart people are living. And it has to exist in a population that's isolated enough that selection pressure can actually speciate and take root, right? So like right now, humans are not evolving. There's basically no selection pressure, and we interbreed too much for us to really sort of genetically go anywhere. It's like stirring a soup too much, and you just get this mush. So evolutionarily speaking, we are probably identical to the people at the time of the Buddha. Like, there's really no reason that we would have necessarily gotten smarter, because there's not necessarily a cohesive evolutionary pressure time period.
Quand dit evolution, la son étape la namgyun evolution là, la qui l'en est pas y a promena, ni qui l'en namgyun qui l'en shigire, di qui joina dintare na yanden sang dinta yomare, ani yang namgyun evolution di to have evolution, ani qui l'en la mi nyung qui l'en des sang. Mon poere ni den sang e evolution mon poere mer kon tita formas.
Yeah, that's very evolution. Panger pasito. 벤지는 미 종럽 마시에 가버리나. 단 벤지에 대해 뒤수 둔두시는 건 시험도 이 강상 니르기 스피시 지금 요한도 참석해 아니 이런 거 벤지는 요한도 그 시험도
Yeah, and also, yeah, they also don't say so much of very short amounts of time, right? They say, once you consider the evolution of a species, something like, so many years, also in this time, also maybe not.
야 타이는 어서 사블다에 치카르도 있으나 다 지치는 엄마래야 아니 지치는 미츠 르바츠 사블 당동서 지치는 야유나 삼바다 가르치르세나 급티디 시진의 배뇨 시진 배뉴레도 사치 카레나 배 미지 메세나 기알베 답되고 쉬우지 가는 메시지고 예선은 진짜 제보 가고 리오 말하다 지금 미치 소소 니마치가 초이나 니마치를 소소를 보야 돼 요로 배 답되고로 사야 동야 마마마 다 대선은 자제고 쉬우지 배 둘로시나 담가 배 마보 사야지나 담가 배 마보 고도 다 남아도에는 소소 사야 지랑나 되고래 고야지나 되고래 다대 마인게 삼로 마보시 되지 소소 사울의 야외 총에 사울 당도에 마보시 직전에 어딘지 전에 대직
Yeah, so yeah, if we consider that maybe people in the past they had either better thinking or better critical thinking or whatever, they had better intellectual capacities, maybe because of external conditions, because before maybe we had more of a simple living, or we had we didn't have all the external conditions that we have now that maybe are not so good. They didn't have as much choices of what to eat and what to wear. It was very, very simple, very straightforward. And then maybe they had more time or opportunities to think or to maybe something like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I understood that.
직전에 렌즈에 배뇨아 다이나 직 남아다와 직 칼라지 찍거나 대상으로 답되고도 작마로 다이나 칼라지 라스면 되게 맞은 렌즈로 어딘지 근데 고야지 렌즈 컴피티션 competition 배나마 배 유니로 대상 가르 강리나 수수 아니 렌즈들지 마치는 수수 다 대알레토도 대온데 삼삼로 나나야 심저 강마 마레 메미티셀 가리나 강이나 되냐와 그 드니 주기치레야 로바치에 배마도 페미니즘 다 대상 페미니즘도 매하차 에 진속 냠럽 그제야 돼 냠럽 제야 배 유니 차로도 so individual chat
also something that maybe could be considered also the nowadays we have more competition, we have more things to worry about, and we're more individualist too nowadays. So all these things might contribute to us to have all these worries, all this competition, and before maybe they had less this.
Yeah, tindichen yang 맞아 삼로랑 다 시바지나라 감때 다 ngama 다치 가서 빼잖아 빼지키우나 그니 ngama가 삼로 당초에 대상 다 삼로니 냠데 지키우나 다 그니네 들으나 견도 마마실도 텔nywan도 가와nywan도시 가스가 수치 들여요나 ngama samlo michige samlo dina pen ngama michige samlo tangtong miti soso shibashura shibade shibando ta te sang de nyuka kasu kono ngoni delian sondr chejona ta ngoni sule kemando itayo seres pen chundo wen chinyi kioni zama sindu zama sma imba sindu siaroshi
Yeah, just tagging.
Cheza mazuta. Cheza mteyo marwa. Ina kasi yonas. Kasi yona tashini haku sarista pe tsama sirish. Chik pe kyuma silidu, nyoma silidu.
So this is something that maybe we can try to analyze and to investigate. If we try to see, the consciousness, the mind of someone that lived in the past, these ancient people, we can maybe try to see if their mind has more qualities, more faults than nowadays, their way of thinking better or worse. Yeah.
Yeah,
directly, of course, we cannot do this nowadays.
no me some of the condition to so some name map up there.
So for example, now directly we cannot analyze their minds, of course, but through what can we know how these people used to think? Where do we have their thoughts, almost their thoughts impressed? So we can look at scriptures or books or things that were written, and then we can compare and try to get to our conclusion.
Yeah, that didn't know.
Oh, I'm curious. I know, Geshe, you're very interested in science. I'm curious how your studying science has affected or changed your understanding of Buddhism.
Yeah, that is a lot. That change la when that you are the second. Can't begin no young Chochin on you Tatang de Chikang. Shamba de Tsering Tsering wasn't issue, but in a gym which in its got told. This is how go here. They go the carpenter to Sena. She don't need the Hakosuna, and they couldn't on the Chetua. Who she down the candidation to big chicken in Juja chicken in Tsering down the candidate Jagdo. Ne non chicken in the shake on his Jagdo. Kuniga, and the Gunda Yadin Karkardu, the dirty Susalina Tachikas, Tapcho Sabashi Cochi and so any Chicana locker. I'm not Sabaji. Chipacheton, Shembaji, Tablam Shiraja and the Jabal. Tanjuan you draws in that didn't always irritated. You want to allow.
So I don't know if it's talking about changing understanding of Buddhism. So yeah, I learned mostly about Buddhism and science. I couldn't go very deep into science, scientific methods, etc. But yeah, in the gross superficial way, how it works. And then I think it benefits me. Yeah, it benefits me to, for example, in one topic, one thing, it's extra tool for me to analyze. So from the perspective of science, then what it says about this, from the perspective of Buddhism, what it says about this. So in this way, there is benefit.
Yeah, neuroscience, I want to Tsering. Want to Tsering going on so cheap. Ombonga, and the country chin, because Nesser to Zoom Gore. Nesser to Zoom, the touching signals in under Pasho Chi Zoom, so the one second junior, Lebaleatan. And it chick, so with that, Tini gone in addition to Captain Grimbachi, Corsa shit on Chidua. Ted and Nambi with a chick, and then also, and then Nazi another one sooner, and the Cacheta. Tendo in a bay and Sonderchia, and Davichaka, Mandavichaka, pay need you to pay. They want set that they not in physics. And when that again, one year begin much condemned to Tinigan Mapamdana. That could so year rank in the town that on the non-big Tatagan Tatan. Young Sovicha payment.
So, for example, there are many things that we can analyze, for example, with neuroscience. So neuroscience, it's going to explain how perception happens. So, for example, we perceive an object in front of us, and this object, this light, is going to reach our sense organs. So, for example, our eye, and this eye is going to send a signal. It's going to travel to the brain, and the brain is going to interpret in some way. So yeah, it's interesting to understand how neuroscience and science is explaining this, and then comparing, because Buddhism also says a lot about this, how perception works, and then comparing these two things. And not only with this, also if you study physics, there are many things that you can use to analyze, to compare, and to looking at different perspectives. And then just by looking at different perspectives, you can get some understanding, extra understanding.
Yeah, some long carry some tangi or sen. Penao, to Wambonga, one she, Tamushi Chipijan Tagijola. Mushi Chipijana pen the word disease, so touch on the Serigon de Shapton. Pen the word Renata, so Mignolia, then the retina says you are Tachi Conliumbe. Tachi photoreceptors condition link to. They are Lene Koya Yatang and it chick Kora one cell Parilia, chin neurotransmitter, Kusuleka Chetan condition. Tini ya tama le tachi central nervous system. But once a day malasi. Tele ya ki. Tini shini tachi de once a malaki koli yanti shinto koli. Tindi ranga gani chu tachi nambita nambi shetan de mena kandi yo sari seto. So la tuati. Nambi na ta e wambo wanshi shiki wala yan jinsum gani kachi shegura. Tate chiya wambo shiba se shiki parile ya kachi yore. Ta wanza sari ga wambo shiba se na ani wanshi da ishi se samdata yo marta. Chik wanshi se da kidani kuzo wanshi ni labda lagututi na ya nambi she da bet lo harita. Ta namba ya na wanshi ini ishi se kun samro. Bet kuni de kiche ga jukurum bet lo hari. Nambi tar. Ta de onde ta wanza sari chibu ishi nando. Tindi rang gani leka chiyo na kandi yo sari. Nambi tar tu gani shetan da pajani. Tsering rang gani shetan di na kandi yo sari.
So for example,
For
example, it's very nice that there are different perspectives that different sciences they take on. For example, if we look at neuroscience, they're going to explain, let's take, for example, the eye, for example, how the eye works. So they explain everything, the light, the way the light comes, and inside the eye, there's the retina, and there's inside the retina, maybe there's the photoreceptors, and then these photoreceptors, maybe they send something. He was explaining more, he knows more than this about me. So, and then it comes to the central nervous system, and then here maybe to, I don't know what else. So anyway, there are many explanations of how it works, these material things, how they work. One thing that they don't talk, and then the Buddhism is going to talk, is the eye consciousness.
Yeah.
So in Buddhism, there is a very, very clear boundary of the mental consciousness, the eye consciousness, and the other sense consciousnesses. And in science, they are going to mention eye consciousness, but they're not going to make such a boundary of what is the eye, the organ itself, what is the consciousness. They don't talk too much in this perspective. But Buddhism is not going to talk in these other respects, not going to talk about the retina, the photoreceptors, the what in the brain is interpreting the signals and etc. So it's very nice to understand, to study a bit about both of them, and then you can have a little bit of both. You can understand a bit more how the world works, I guess.
Physics,
for example, if you go to physics, and then just to explain a bit, and then we stop.
In the Karsata, quantum physics,
Okay, so quantum physics, going to quantum physics.
Ko dentron chiki nala manzindona, dentron chik. Atom chiki nala manzi kabli. Konga nala gitu chakartu. Tadi nala yang switchi ta control. Tanda ta ponde the manang there is a Geshe pokinala, the jury. Tere proton sesio, proton and neutron. But there's over the Karaguzo, Mama Tudona, Mama Ticablia. Takuzu make any Sadum Kuripa session, Sadum Kuripa. Counter Carson. Peggy any year change, year chill, Peggy any year chendi. Peggy you're the Yechenica pen, River Tambo shows you about. You're challenging Java this situation, subject to the object. Observer that Java this situation, Pashoke, and the youth in Java. Pashu yet and Java this dona, ye chantium, you want to go. They don't nambita of Goni. The year that ye chant the bit, pensit to Nabjad. There's a pen, sonder pen, each would change.
Also something that's very beautiful that we can find in physics, and specifically in quantum physics. So quantum physics is a field that's going to look at very subtle, very small things. So for example, looking at the atom, and then going inside the atom, you're going to have the protons, neutrons, electrons, etc. And if you keep going, smaller and smaller, and then you're going to find other objects, other things, I don't know their names. And something that now quantum physics also says is the relationship between the consciousness that's apprehending these objects and these objects themselves. So So now there's a relationship. So for example, if this object changes, there's going to be a change in the consciousnesses, the subject, the observer, the observer. If there's a change in the observer, there's also going to be a change in the object. And this is something very interesting because there's a lot of relationship in this to many topics of Buddhist philosophy. Buddhism is also going to understand objects as something that has a very strong relationship to the observer, to the mind.
Yeah. So this is the chidani chik samla tancho chik chana suzu nga tsuki namji rapa kani samla tana mitsi nole nima riri ni sui tele ya jerya pe tele ya jerni samla tanya du tingori pe na suzu samla den juwa dwa sona pasho yer tsangma juwa dwa chikto kondro shik chimbo de lang sona khan de tong shangna ya chik ni jiwa men jiwa ta chik manzi wan jiwa ta tongde ya 나 소소 생각나 배 시간도 니 지고 차요 qabla 아니 지 매지 갈랍되나 소소는 너 파쇼도 가리나야 약보르시 통돼야 그 거지는 진짜 거라고 강해서
And bringing this to a more superficial, more coarse understanding of this relationship between subject and object, we can relate, for example, when we get angry. We get angry, then we can see how this changes the objects around us. So people are not going to be beautiful, people are going to be ugly, everything is going to be uglier. And also in the same way, if we have peace or happiness or love in our mind, also we're going to perceive the object in a very different way. So then in this gross level, very gross, very superficial level, we can see the relationship between your mind and everything else, everything you're perceiving. So a gross, very coarse example again.
Benamiji to you chasha, Namgati, Kora, Aran, Tamanda, Tom, then the thing was Tonde. We Yurti, Wangi, Yurti, Matsu, Tananda, Yurchen Koran, Matsu, Jordan, Solotan, Chitelamaga, the Chilpa, and the Minket, the Karch, Pashu Yurki, Wangi, Matsu, Jordan.
And also in the same way, considering how things work both ways, let's say, for example, we're going in the streets, we walk in the street very, very peacefully, very nice. And then we look to the side and there's a very drunk person, very drunk, and then he's drinking a lot. And at the same moment that we see this, our mind also gets a little bit strange, can get, maybe we look at this object and we don't like it. And so it comes this feeling, whatever feeling it is. So we can see also how everything else around us is also influencing our minds. So, this.
아니 맞춰 Geshe 파일라 맞춰 Geshe 봐라 데라 아니 맞춰 Geshe 봐 gyurna di gande gyurore dila gyuro mara.
But for example, yeah, we have our way of thinking, our mind, and then let's say that there's an object like this computer, right? So if we change our thinking, this computer is gonna stay the same, right? It's not gonna change, it's not gonna become an elephant or anything like this. Maybe like this, yeah. So how is it?
But it could become a frisbee, like through it.
Yeah. One example.
아주 잘하디 컨디지요 마인데 저런 게 따당는 데가 차들인다. 제가 저런 따당는 거는 라리스. 배나 다 컨디지라고 해.
Yeah, so this object is going to depend on the way that you see it. So, yeah, so if we change our mind, okay, the object here, the atoms of the what's made of, it's not going to change just because you change your way of thinking or.
당원이 데빌린도나 그 인세부 간도나 당원이 디잘라 딘딘지 문이 딘딘지 요래요 말 단한 가지고 통나 에 그런 작보도 있다 또도듯이 또거도 당원이 가지고 비코잉의 그 접당들 집다터나 그 간디시 그랬어요. 근데 단한 가지고 잠물리는 가지고 아주 알아서 사이 콜레강을 요래 알아서 베직 템포를 통들 이는 점 아주 반나라 네 도도시로 되고라 이 강은 가서 돼요. 다 자침부 쉬우시니 지타터는 직대 용조 된대로 오시리다. 단이 가세요나 아주 될배 장신도 단통 치시스라 마이크로스코프. 근데 지타위 kable야 데 딘디 솔레티오 마레 단당가서 다나신 에 코에페 코나래 코란데다 코란게 나래 동전이 동전 마요. 다단지 도기도 다단디 간디스타인 세트스도 좀 뭐니 간디스타 왜니 세카 단단한 것을 라바 간이타나 테본리나 솔레티오 타포도 코란 타바시 라오엔도 시마도 강에 때문에 딘딘디식 다 담보 가서 딘딘디식 찍다고 들어.
So yeah, if we look in a profound, deeper way into, we can ask ourselves how this object actually exists. So how does this object exist? Because as we look, like for example, this computer here, it's very solid, it's very hard. That's the way that we see this object exists. But if we look in a very deep way, for example, we can look in a microscopic level, we're going to see that it's a different thing. We might find out that as science has found out that there is actually more empty space than a solid space in this thing. That's not the way that we perceive. We are perceiving this, and in the same way, we can also think in regards to big things. For example, the world that we're living in. We look things are very stable. Things are very, everything is on its place. Everything is okay. But if you get a little bit further away, in space, then you're gonna see that you're actually in a ball of rock, drifting at incredible speed through space. So you can ask, what's reality? What's the way that things actually exist? And of course, in a coarse way, in a superficial way, it's stable here. Yeah, it's you can say it's solid, etc. But it's appearing this way to be very solid, independent, not depending on any other things to exist. But we can ask, is this actually the way that things are existing right now?
Yeah, tindo ngaranse sosole samla tane che jebajimo macheno ngaranse che tapondo shi. Soseta anjwa chuni mengen jwando yo ngumdo. Ta kandin tungo yo mare seunde ta marsu shifta be moni penjwa relin tungo yo ta ngasu tungo yo mare konta ta tungo yo mare. Jiang garba nishita a very gross level. Temato. Tangunishananga susu pondri kandeji yoris. Kandeji yorit. Tang tape momboji la ten pe. Choshan chignetan pe ninga sambo shimush pe jik chocho pe tor chocho. Hajing pe the ka. Pe hajik chocho tong pe the jun de pe jun mambo shimush pe parchi kande yashi. Tindijik nangleya tsodiyan shireta kantar pe kalahurtan parche mambo se uratan tindijik nangleya pe shamba mambo jik tendi jik chocho ina nga tsodi tsogumda
저기 말이야. Yes, for example, also regarding how we exist. So we usually see ourselves as having a stable body, having a sometimes even strong, hard body. Okay, we can perceive the gross impermanence that we change and everything, all of this. But if we go in a very, very detailed, very, very deep, trying to see how this body exists, how this body is here, it's actually very easy to be harmed or easy to destroy. Or if you have some obstacles, some things happening, some things that can harm you, it's very easy to get a sickness, or it's actually very fragile. the body, and there is a, but that's not our feeling. Our feeling is not this, that the body is very fragile. But if you look very, very deeply, it's very fragile.
Tanda no be touch of gun, Tanda Dindro, a chick table in a counter Dindro, Tatantele, Tanda Demba Nishi Guaningatiri. Kuzu Demba Shiv Kaulaya, Rapa Gun, Kandich to Koran Kandich to Namjing Aras, a gross level communication. The Korwin, the tongue country, shas, tears part things of deeper drana, that Tundam of Shat. Tanda Nigani, Tamasu, Shutam Shete. Tatang ni che yores orta counter chechuni yores choran tatang de raba gani tatang chikchena ko kangle ko ale yore pechutan yore chi yores te mayen be raba tatang de igne tele gene beyond de tele ndeni ta ngone nguyo kangle ko karisha siondi ta tondam kangle kashi kanronde ane kazob nabja su kashi sayo mar.
So this is the process, this is the point of what we call in Buddhism the two truths. So the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. So conventional truth is going to be seeing things the way we perceive them. So the way we use things, the way we make use of things in our life. And then ultimate truth is going to be the way that in Buddhist philosophy, we try to understand how things actually exist. It's this process that we went through. That's how it's going to happen. Then you don't talk anymore about conventionality. You don't talk more about the conventional side, how we perceive things.
Yeah, that igani, then was that pashu year the pa yixus. That's also year gangle that karimba in the collection. So samlo gangle chipachi. Then when it's saying also any chick shipa coronlia, cheshimo boche. That was when it a courage. And it's samlo ziati. Koron garajing one it, Shipazia the Yashi, Tigashish. Tindigenita, low Joyan to Mentusia, Kachishetan Korotel. Low Jom training chair, Yodame, so mind. That day, Tandanga Bondo, Chala to Sikon, Kashidero. Tanga the same Gogon Kashishinas. Shipa Gonish Takandona, Shipa the object in Bachaja. Co condition, co Takoya, Jiri Divashire. Koran quality.
So the Yuyan or
Eugene same day yang aso yunjo jani same chipache ko ta chipa thatin same chipache ta same day ya shiri diga shiri ko ranjin de kare ko yaji ta yunjo shiri menjo shiri ta ti gani tene ta lo jonga du mindu ta lo jongaram pat sama yonsa ganga ti gani.
So eventually the ultimately you apply this analysis to the mind, your mind itself. So you analyze in ultimate sense, is it something good? It's nature, looking at its nature. It goes to the good side, to the bad side. Is there ways of training, of changing? There is change, there is no change. So you use the same process of seeing what actually is here in your mind to establish all of these stages of practice and the nature of the mind, etc.
Yeah, I understand this one.
Okay, sorry, now it became a lot of time. Yes, so